from the News Channel 5 Network. This is OpenLine.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to OpenLine. I'm Carrie Sharp. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are in the month of June, and that means it is Pride Month, and that is our topic for tonight. I would love to introduce you to our guest from MTSU tonight, Dr. Marisa Richmond. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Back after a 5 or 6 year absence, I think you said. So
yes.
we're glad to have you here in the studio. A professor at MTSU, I said, both gender studies and also history. Tell the audience more about yourself. What do you do? What do you teach?
Well, I've been at MTSU since 2006. I've been teaching since '92. My specialty is U.S. political history, 20th century, but I teach basically all U.S. history, even pre-Civil War. This past semester, I did African American history and an LGBTQ studies class in the fall, and it'll be back next year.
And how did that come about?
The LGBTQ studies class happened by accident.
Oh.
I used to be the president of the Tennessee Transgender Political Coalition. So I was speaking at an Amnesty International meeting in Memphis. And so I was back in Murfreesboro and I was rolling the cart. In those days we had to do that to do AV in our classes.
Yep.
And someone stopped me in the hallway and she had been at the Amnesty International event, said, "Do you teach here?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So she goes, "Oh, you should come teach to my class." So she invited me to come give a guest lecture to her women's history class, and the professor said, "Congratulations, you passed the audition." I didn't even know I was auditioning, and next thing they said, they're like, "We want you to teach in our department too," and so I've been doing so ever since.
Well, that's a nice compliment, but
yes.
Also here's some more job duties for you.
Right.
Well, it's obviously something that you've been quite successful at. Why is it necessary for that at the college level?
At you mean those sort of classes?
Yeah.
Well, every student, and this goes back to when we saw the push for African American studies and Latino studies, every student wants to see themselves in history.
Yeah.
They want to hear their stories. Women's history is the same way. For so many years, the history of this country was written from a very narrow perspective. But the country is the most diverse country in the world. And all of these different groups have faced unique challenges, but have made significant contributions. And those students want to see themselves and they want to hear those stories. And so that's how these classes start to come about.
You know what, I'm glad you said that because I think it brings up a good point, because even when we talk about Pride Month, anytime you mention LGBTQ, it becomes a divisive subject still today. And yet no matter where you fall on that spectrum of whether you support it or don't, educating yourself should always be a good thing, right?
Right. My mom used to take me and my sister to the library over at Hadley Park when we were growing up in the summertime and said, "Yeah, I want you to read." She didn't pick the books out. We picked our own books. So I learned to love to read. And in that process, I learned to appreciate learning. Just the process. Yes. By picking up books, you start to see the world from different perspectives. My family traveled extensively, and so I got exposed to a lot of things. And I think that's important. And certainly, not all of my students are exposed to a lot of diversity when they get to college, and that's part of the challenge of college and preparing them to move into the workforce where they're going to deal with people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of interests.
That is very, very true. I want to remind you, this is OpenLine tonight. It is your chance to call in, comment, ask questions. The number is at the bottom of the screen, 615-737+. Until your calls, I'll just walk us through this next hour. But let's talk about Pride Month, which is now June. We see parades and festivals. We had one down in Franklin just over the weekend, which was the second year that they've been able to have it. Drew 4,000 people the first year, which is quite a draw. Obviously, it was a big success. We're seeing this all over the country, though, all over the world. Tell me about Pride Month. Give me that historical perspective.
Pride Month traditionally is June. It dates from 1969, the Stonewall Riots at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village in New York. And so that event took place in 1969 in the month of June as people from the community stood up against police harassment. And so these Pride festivals started from New York and kind of spread outward from there as people are saying, you know, we deserve our say in society. We don't want to face discrimination anymore. And we're proud of who we are. There's nothing wrong with being different.
Yeah, you know, I was reading about the Stonewall Riots, and one of the articles said a half century, and I was like, half century? Wait a second. It has been a half century.
We celebrated 50 years just before COVID in summer of 2019. And so, so all over the country, but especially in New York, that 50th anniversary was particularly special for all of us. And so, of course, then we got to COVID, and that sort of affected everything. But 2019 was a special year because we did look back over 50 years, and we were having sort of these retrospectives and trying to understand where we were in 2019, where we were in 1969, how we move forward over those 50 years, and then what additional challenges the community has faced as we move forward over the next 50 and 100 years.
Paint the picture for maybe what it was like in 1969 for a gay or lesbian or trans person to live in the United States.
Well, almost every state had laws banning sodomy, so same-sex relationships were illegal. Many communities had laws banning cross-dressing, so even gender diversity was illegal in many places. In these bars, if you got caught cross-dressed, you would go to jail. If a same-sex couple was holding hands, they went to jail. If they were dancing, even if they were not touching, they went to jail. And of course, their names would then be published in the newspapers, or the local TV stations that would sometimes say, so-and-so got arrested in this bar in this situation, and they would lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods. Their families would just cut them off. And so, that's where we were in 1969, and people got tired of the police harassment, got tired of the job discrimination, got tired of the rejection from their families, their workforce, their churches, and other religious institutions. And people started fighting back in the 60s.
And Gay Pride Month really started with, I guess, a feeling of protest. Now sometimes you look at the festivals and it looks more like a party, right? Yes. And there has been some push and pull between those two.
Correct. Some people, again, remind everybody that, and Stonewall was not the first protest.
No.
There were others in LA, Philadelphia, and San Francisco, even before New York. So kind of leading up to New York's and Stonewall. And so a lot of people say it was a protest, it should still be a protest. But for those, especially for those of us who are older, we who grew up in the closet and did not come out in some cases till very late in life, a lot of people say we need to celebrate. This is something that we were denied. We didn't get to go to proms as we wanted to, or with the person we wanted to. And we couldn't walk across our college campuses holding hands and with the person we loved. And so those are the sorts of things that we have to do. And that's why it has to be a celebration. But I understand a lot of people look back at 69, said that was a protest, we should be protesting. And I'm sure, especially with the political agenda that certain groups are pushing against us now, it's certainly something that a lot of us feel is important, that we have to push back against that political agenda.
So it's still a protest mind in some aspects.
Yeah. But it's kind of moved more into the political arena more so than anywhere else.
Obviously, this month is a chance to celebrate and have the festivals and the parties, but is it also then a time to come together and say, this is where we need to focus our efforts next? Because you look at Tennessee and just the laws that were, that were up for debate in the last legislative session. Correct.
And so there's a series of prides all across the state. So this Saturday, you mentioned Franklin. Memphis and Chattanooga had their prides also. Coming up this coming Saturday on June 11th, Pulaski and Cookeville have prides. There's additional pride scheduled in Jackson, Johnson City, and Knoxville, and then Murfreesboro in September when people come back to school. And so having these are important, and among the organizations, or the political organizations, the advocacy groups, either at the county level or statewide level, signing up volunteers, registering people to vote, and reminding people that the battles are still being fought. Many people don't need to be reminded of that, especially in this state, but reminding people of the necessity of organizing, registering, and of course voting in November.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will continue this conversation about Pride Month in Tennessee. It is celebrated in June. We're coming right back after that. We would love to take your phone calls as well, 615-737+. Stay with us.